Hello, hello, hello everyone, and welcome to the World Pokemon Federation, first in several seasons, Season 12 Psycho Boost Power Rankings, with your host, Manchi the Amazing, and our wonderful co-host. Please say hello.
Hello, I'm Etesian.
Wait, it's Etesian, not Etesian?
It's not Etesian, it's not Estan, it's not Etasia, it's not any of the other versions I've heard that are wrong.
Isn't Estan just a different person?
I don't know, someone called me Estan after they were talking about our PGP games for week 1. I have no idea how they managed that, but they did.
You know, that's very interesting, very interesting. Alright, and Estan over here, Etesian, is our one of the co-commissioners of the league, as well as the Ice Div mod. And after seeing the Ice Div PRs, decided to contribute to Psycho Boost because, yeah, they haven't had a PRs the last 2 seasons, which is, you know, not the greatest. So here we are, and I would honestly say that I just realized I had forgot to put the slideshow on. I'm glad I don't have anything.
I was wondering why I don't see you on it.
But now it's open. Don't worry, we won't be restarting the recording because that would require me thing. But just to ignore the spoilers that were on the side of the slideshow before. So I would say that our first team coming up is positively tantalizing. How do you?
And that.
Yeah.
And that would be Bacon's Tantalizing Tentacles.
Yep.
This team was rough to rate because, like, honestly, just look at that bottom 3, look at the Gligar. This team somehow has 4 weaknesses to knock off. And in general, just not a lot going on, honestly.
This team has the OU strategy of Slowbro Future Sight Teleport into a Shifu and Aegislash, and then just forgot that they were drafting a team, I think. They have so many mods that are just absolutely terrible.
This is one of the rare times where I feel like, in draft you often see people who draft a top 6 they can bring all the time, and then some random garbage that might come to a week or 2. This almost feels like it doesn't even have a consistent 6, just because
I don't think this game is consistent 5. Like, we reviewed a team in the up-and-coming Speed PRs, which had like a top 5. This team doesn't even have a top 5. This team is Urshifu, Slowbro, Rotom-Heat, and Aerodactyl. This team is far too weak to everything that Aegislash was weak to really justify picking Aegislash as one of their top 5.
Pretty much. It almost has to run screens all the time just so Aegislash can get something done.
Yeah. Not that it doesn't have a few screens options, to be fair. I think Rotom, Slowbro, and Comfey will get dual screens, but Slowbro and Comfey might also only get one of the screens. Well,
I believe Slowbro gets both, I'm not sure about Comfey, but Rotom definitely does have both, and it's a pretty solid setter as far as those go.
Yeah. This team is just weird, man. I don't like Gligar, but on top of having Gligar, which is like got the issue of being just a passive ground type so that it gets set up on, they have a Diglett. I couldn't tell you why.
They did also
get
get
this Shifu
one-pointers
by coach trading in free as well. I wonder what that team looked like before that. I wonder if it felt more coherent, because this team has one Mon above 100 base speed, which is Mega Aerodactyl.
There's a bit of priority that somewhat offsets that, but it's just Aegislash Sneak, which is already kind of troubled.
And Sucker for
Shifu. Sucker is fine, and then it's Comfey, which really isn't a powerhouse. It's fine, but, you know.
Comfey is more of a win condition than a revenge killer, unless you've really seriously taken Chip. Which, to be fair, they have a ways to seriously take Chip, I'm not sure that it's going to be sufficient enough. I do think this team is decently capable of getting that Comfey win condition off, and the Aero win condition off. I'm just more concerned about the team losing before it gets that positioning up. Because as much as it's really good at removing pieces from the board, it's not really good at stopping their opponents from removing pieces from the board as well.
Yeah, definitely. They also do not have a lot of valid pieces to swap in depending on the matchup to trade away from the opponent.
Yeah, and if they're like Scarfer, being either a Shifu or Rotom gets knocked off in the given week, it's going to be rough. Yeah, just not a big fan of it. Also, low kick is base 100 into Ashifu, which has always been something that it struggles with. So a lot of mons that it might want to try and switch into that are normal type, not only are threatening it with the traditional T-wave, which it also dislikes, but also like a strong low kick, which you don't have with a lot of other mons that are similar enough to Ashifu, like your Mega Medicham or what have you.
Yeah, and while Urshifu does have decent physical defense, actually weirdly high physical defense for what it is, this team also doesn't have a lot of okay manual recovery, but no way to pass it on to something like Urshifu. There's no wish or anything. You have to rely on comfy Leech Seed, if that.
Confei and Tangler, both
yeah,
known for being titans of Leech Seed support. Yeah, I'm not loving it. I don't love this team very much. I think this team is very painful. I'm genuinely curious as to what this team looked like before the transactions. I imagine it was probably more coherent.
There is something resembling a proper base here. They could probably use some transactions and turn this into something decent, but they would have to ask one of their high budget ones to free up the money to do something.
Yeah. Ultimately, it just is what it is. The ice matchup is also like a bit of a concern, like to freeze dry mons, because it's really just Rotom that resists freeze dry, which is not great. Aegislash is like I look at like this team and its matchup into Kyurem, and I'm like terrified. Having 1.5 mons faster. Oh, sorry, having 2 mons faster, but then also 0.5 in the Confei, which is kind of faster but kind of not. But then just like conceding a kill every time it's in against one of those slower mons. I don't love it. Alright. Well, after Team 60, we really have to, reset the scale. And maybe we should consider rating these teams on a scale of, let's just say 1 to 9.
Oh, damn it.
That's right. This team paid 17 points for Infernape, 21 points for Landorus, 12 points for Klefki, 11 points for Superior, and then decided to get 2 good mods. This team has 2 good mods.
D11 for Superior is okay. It's typically also that in standard draft when we're not doing this weird board thing. But there is a lot of money spent on a lot of places where you could have cut down, both in the top tiers and also, I'm just looking at that bottom 5 and none of that is really that interesting there. Like the Odino makes sense as a Wish Passer into Finny, and I can't really respect any of the other 4.
Like Aurora Regis is nice if you really specifically wanted Toxic Spikes, but why not just get a poison that combines 3 of these mons that has Toxic Spikes?
Toxic Spikes are also iffy when you yourself have a Finny.
Yeah.
You're the one in control of the terrain, but you're still mostly shutting down your own T-Spikes there.
Also, I think a lot of opposing teams are not going to be concerned about the area dose and are going to bring Toxic Spikes anyway, and Toxic Spikes has always been one of the best counterplays to Finny.
Essentially, yeah. Unless it's Boots Finny, but it doesn't really have reason to run that. The removal here is tangible.
Yeah. I just, look, I'm not big on this team at all. I just think it struggles in a lot of ways that it doesn't need to struggle. Infernape at 17 is just a shock. Like, they're absolutely paying through the nose for it. And the fact that both of its mons, Mega Gyarados and Tapu Fini, like the good mons, both share the same weaknesses is a bit awkward. Both Superior and Jolteon being the electric checks is like electric and then cross as well to some extent. It's just not great. Like, they're not taking Ice Beam super well with this team. All I'm saying is this team does get 6-0'd by Octazol.
Another big thing is that that Gyarados and Finny kind of have ways to get through waters, but they do struggle a bit there.
Yeah.
And the 2 big offensive mons also hate offensive waters, in particular if any have Aqua Jet, and these 2 really just aren't going to go anywhere.
Yeah. No, more so Nape than Lando with Aqua Jet, but absolutely. It's just not great. I really feel like this team could have done a lot more with what they had. And I think that there are a few teams that, in Grace, took like 1 good mon and then split them into 3 mediocre mons, of which like 1 or 2 would actually come to games. And I just am not sure that was a correct decision.
Yeah, I can't knock the Ariados too hard because it's 1 point, but it just feels like a lot of money was spent in places where you didn't really have to, and you could have gotten 1 or 2 more good ones out of it instead.
Yeah. Feeling pressured to bring in Fernape every game is one of the worst feelings you can have. Alright, well...
Infernape is pretty generically bringable, but at the same time it also has to fill a lot of roles here in that it's almost the only possible Scarfer. The hazard setting on this team is quite
the
bad.
alternate Scarfer being superior in a format without hidden power, not a good look.
Yeah, definitely.
And Scarfing Fini is fine, but it's certainly not something you want week to week to week to week, especially when it is your like second best win condition. Yeah, I can't rate this team. This team feels like it would be incredibly unfun to build with.
It feels just about workable, so there's a substantial rift between it and Bacon's, but it's still pretty fucked out for a good reason.
Alright, well, that said, you know, they might say that our opinions are cap. Personally, I think that they are J-cap. So,
I did not sign up for these ones.
You know you did.
Did I?
Look, you can feel free to make transitions if you don't want me to do the puns.
I'll leave it up to you. I think it's funnier if I take psychic damage every time my slide changes.
You know what? That's fair enough. Yeah, so subtoxic slow bros. Notably, no slow bro. That's why this team's bad. No, this team has a lot of offense. A lot of offense. It's got Zamazi, Nidoking, Dracovish, Mega Blastoise, Lele. Mega Blastoise and Lele pretty decent together. And then like Thundeye, Lurantis, and Spiritomb. All of which are just offense, 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 offense. This team does lose to the opposing Runa Regis if their Mayrule like hits it with a water move, because then the Runa Regis gets huge power. You know, really they were counter drafted, but this team just does. It only has Blissey as like a reliable switch into things. It's only got one flying resist. It's only got like its ground matchup is not super great because both Thundurus and Lurantis are not particularly sturdy mons, and they have a lot of they have two super significant ground weaknesses. They're putting a lot of pressure on making Zamazi their checks to things, when Zamazi is already pressured as like their fast mon win condition.
Yeah, and the fact that they're lacking bulk is also compounded by the fact that really we could just count it as Blissey and Blastoise, and Blastoise good bulk is offset by the fact that it's the almost only real remover on the team, so it's definitely going to be whittled down by hazards and the like. But when looking at other teams, we definitely had a couple where we looked at them and said, okay, this team drafted 4 or 5 offensive ones that are really good and sufficient for every week. And then they stopped and they drafted bulk and support and such for their offense. Wish J-Caps did the same, because you have enough at offense here. You can remove like half these ones and then just load up on some bulk and utility, and this team would probably be a lot higher if that happened.
It's not OU. Certainly not all Gen OU. Like, Blissey offense is just going to fold. Especially like, well, as strong as Mega Blastoise is with Terrain Pulse in Psychic Terrain, it doesn't have Shell Smash, so it's not a win condition, which is... Yeah, this team really does only have Zama and then like Scarfer cleaning as a win condition as well, which is its own set of awkwardness.
Yeah, something could be said about speed control and trying to lower things such that Lele could attempt to outspeed them, but I'm just looking at something like Prankster, Thunderspeed, T-Wave, and not being able to click that in Lele terrain.
Yeah. Thunderspeed's just bad. It's just a bad mod. I would not have paid 15 for it. I can't believe it is the same price as Lele, who is significantly better.
I understand it here because they did need some speed, but there were different ways to go.
Indeed there are. Also, only one Fairy Resist was the other thing. I don't know why this team doesn't have a Fire type. I feel like a Fire type that's like... Even like a Simisear on this team would have... It creates a threat bubble, because that's going to be able to switch in once or twice, and you're going to be able to slap a Scarf on it and do okay, just because Fire Blast is a strong move. it really feels like there are a lot of easy things that they could have done to increase their threat bubble that they just didn't do, and just picked random stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, you know what? Sometimes you just sometimes you just have to go down into the tube because the Germans are over. You're living in London during the Blitz, or in Toronto in this case, I suppose. This team is okay. It's got some broken mons, absolutely broken mons. Zero Aura, Mew, Rillaboom, Volcarona, absolutely broken. Crocodile and Lopunny, both situationally okay, and playing relatively similar roles here, which is a bit weird. Clefairy, funny. Wartortle, funny. Drifblim, probably not actually the choice I would have gone for here, but also funny. But it was the same price as picking up a Steel type, which they just didn't do. Doesn't have a grounded poison, which is annoying for a few of these mons. Yeah, I just don't understand some of the decision making they made towards the end of their draft.
Grounded poison would have been nice to offset T-spikes and such, but also regular spikes are really rough for this team because the removal is just Mew and Volcarona, which plays into another problem with the fact that
There's also
this
Wartortle.
team has... Alright, also Wartortle. Which plays into the fact that this team doesn't really have much replenishable bulk. It has Brilla Terrain to help with that, but you're looking at Roost Volcarona, Roost Clefairy, and that's kind of just it, so you're probably going to be forced into bulky Mew a lot of the time rather than running any interesting sets.
Having to run bulky Mew is absolutely making your team easier to prep for. Especially it's concerning because Mew's weaknesses are the things that this team is most weak to, specifically Ghost and Dark, because the Ghost and Dark checks are both weak to Fairy and Fighting, and also not very good. They're just not great mons. Crocodile and Mega Lopunny are not mons that you want to be using as your main switch-ins to types that seriously threaten a lot of your major mons.
Dark in particular is troublesome here because should they come, we have two Violet mons. There's a Volcarona and of course Mew itself, which both gives a lot of valuable items to knock off, and Mew itself just doesn't really have anywhere to safely swap in. You'd have to try with an Intimidate bulky Crocodile or such, which works sometimes. But this is a very
Sorry.
You go.
Okay. I also feel like this team is really weak to offensive rocks with close combat, because Crook and Lop are also their only rock resists. They both use to check. They're both frail mods that are not super great at having longevity, that are being used to check really serious offensive weaknesses for this team, because they are going to bring their rock type when you have a Volcarona. Rock Dusk is going to outspeed your Grassy Climb with Rillaboom. So if you're letting your team get worn down, because you have a grounded poison type, and Mew and Crocodile and Rillaboom are all taking Toxic Spikes damage, reducing the value of that grassy terrain, and your opponent's getting max value from that grassy terrain, you're going to be in that position where you are just getting cleaned by an opposing like a rock or some sort of thing. That is a serious weakness that this team just has to Ghost, it has to Rock, it has to Dark, and that's just not something that's just the key weakness of a mon like Crocodile and of a mon like Megalop really showing.
Yeah, and this team really isn't that difficult to wear down, both because of the mentioned irreplenishable defense thing, and also because it also is pretty spikes weak on a team that loves to spam momentum and has a really heavy lean toward physical offense. You also have to consider helmets and the like. There are a couple of knockoff mons here, so they can make do, but even just removing a helmet is still gonna force you to take a bit of damage from it.
Yeah, absolutely. I also don't really understand the purpose of Drifblim on this team. Again, they could have gotten Duraludon, they could have gotten Togedemaru. There are a million random steals in 4 points that are pretty decent for what they are. But they picked up Drifblim. Look, it's funny. It's funny, Grassy Seed Unburdened Mon, but I'm just not sure it's going to be winning those games.
It makes sense that it's here if you squint until you can't see the budget. But those 4 points really could have gone into a Duraludon or something.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, now that London doesn't have the Blitz, there's one thing that London is very much famous for having these days that's still bearing down upon them. That's right. London is known for its rain. It's a rain team. Why don't you enlighten the community on how you feel about rain teams, Etesian?
Moving on.
Moving on? We have moved
You
on.
cannot make me talk about the rain team.
That's what you're here for. I only brought you here because there is a rain team.
Dang it. It's a fine rain team. It's got a bit of a budget rain core, which can work out fine for it given the otherwise lack of speed going on here.
The budget
Bit
of
of
25 points.
Don't worry about it. The real problems with this team honestly lie elsewhere, and I would say it is in covering things like offensive dogs, and particular knockoff spam is really good against this team. You have 2, possibly 3 mons that are weak to rocks and want to run boots almost all the time. That rock Pelipper is sometimes a thing, but still. And you have a Deoxys and a Gengar, and yet your only dark check is Beware. Absol and Morgrim are not gonna cut it. And Beware is fine physically, but then you also look at the ghost checks on this team, and yeah, it's not when you have that Dio defense and just doesn't make the distance.
Yeah, I also think it's important to remember that there are other technical dark check, Morgrim, which I think is probably a better one than Absol, even though Absol is justified. Morgrim doesn't like getting knocked off, because the main thing it does is like screens. So losing that light clay is going to make it less valuable. Or if you're running a defensive variant, then you're losing your EVO light. Like, having knock checks that hate knock is not a great idea. So it really is just coming down to Beware. And Beware, the major concern I had with this team was that Beware being the primary rock resist, or even Beware and Pert, neither of them have great longevity into opposing Edgequake. Specifically, like, coming from rock types especially. When you have like a Gyrum and you have a Sizzle, neither of which love taking rock moves themselves, even if they can follow up by threatening the rock type. Yeah, and I also feel like the Zapdos and Kyurem are often forced to run very offensive variants because of that knockoff weakness, so that they don't really want to run boots as much, which really limits how good they are and how versatile they are.
Yeah, that is another thing here in that this team has offense that will get the job done, but it's not the sort of team where you can just, I don't know, lead with a Sash Morgrim to set up screens and then go for offense and just go for broke. This team does have to play a bit of a slower game, and it's just a worry about how much they're gonna get worn down during that. They do have enough recovery, but enough hurdles in their way.
Yeah, it's really reliant on Mons who appreciate being able to run being able to run offense on providing most of that offense. That said, I think Gengar we haven't mentioned yet, and Gengar is very strong on this team. I think we mentioned basically everything else. Their water matchup is also a bit awkward because it's Kyurem, it's Pelipper, who's taking extra damage from water moves because of Drizzle, and it's Cradily, and Cradilly's not like amazing. So you hate switching into Scald on this team unless you are bringing Cradily.
Yeah, and it's another reason why Pelipper is more likely to be Boots rather than Damprock, most likely. For one, because Swampert just spams Flip Turn this gen, but also because you would like to have Boots so that you can do a slightly better job of switching into opposing waters, which otherwise you're really just only relying on Kyurem.
Yeah, so
and
that
if
you
you
don't...
get your Boots knocked off in that, then that's curtains.
Yeah, but also so that you don't have to defog with Zapdos, you don't have to defog with Sizzle. I think it's kind of weird not having Rapid Spin with Deoxys defense, because it seems mostly here to provide spike support. Yeah, it's just awkward. It's always awkward. Sizzle at least is a pretty decent defogger. Well, you know, we've had fair share. We have Commissioner of the chat, and now I think what we have time for is performance review. So we'll have the opportunity for you to performance review one of our favorite moderators, Nathan of the Charlotte Gym Charles. How are you feeling about the team of your subordinate?
It's fine. It's very much.
It's very much just fine.
it's very much a middle of the road team, which is not really much of a critique, but it also doesn't really have any. I don't look at this team and no one thing catches my eye and say, ooh, that's good. No, it's just, it's alright.
It's an OU team, but not. It's like they have 5 OU mons, which is really strong. Actually, don't know Sompet's still an OU, but I think it might be. So these are really strong mons. And I think they do have decent flexibility. It's just this is the I think most example of transaction breaking their brain. Because Sork, Creedon, and Amolga used to just be surf edged. I think surf edged on this team makes this team look significantly scarier. I just don't know what the thought process is behind Sork. This team there. The speed control is awkward beyond the Scizor and the E-Speed Dragonite, and having that first impression does help that. But also just like this team is strong. The core team is really strong. Mega Scizor, Clefable, and D9 are all really good sweepers.
Yeah, Surfers here also would have provided some more removal, which Victini and Dragonite really would have appreciated. They're still fine otherwise with Dragonite and Scizor, but
yeah,
it's a solid team. It definitely has a bit of versatility, although a lot of the mons with the versatility tend to lean to 1 or 2 particular sets. It can definitely do stuff. It's just fine where we had a lot of good teams.
Well, you know, I think one of the strongest counterplays to a very high momentum team like this is being able to recover just for free without having to like waste move turns. So I think we should refer now to the regen team. We have the Mexico City Wall Breakers, and it's got a regen core, and then a melodic, and then it just kind of stops making sense. Not that the mons are good, bad. All of the mons on this team are good or decent. I just don't. It doesn't feel very coherent. I feel like they picked their first 3 or 4 up and then felt, oh, I don't have a lot of points, and then picked up Steelix. They saw that Mega Tyranitar was criminally underpriced at 11. It's a funny pickup. Not super great with Melodic. Honestly, not super great with Torn, with G-King, with Mienshao, because it does limit the amount of recovery they're getting. So if they're coming in and taking a big Volt Switch or a U-turn, and they're also taking a turn of Sand Chip, you're not going to get as much impact out of regen. They have a Bombi, who I think is honestly pretty decent on this team. They have Rotom Cut, who is okay. It being the only like electric check besides Steelix, like having both electric, having super electric weak top bit with Taunt T and Melodic, and then having both Rotom Cut and Steelix both being weak to fire as well as electric is just rough. It's just rough.
Yeah, not a lot of electrics get fire moves to really exploit that, but at the same time, Steelix's special defense is just so low that you can just kind of whittle that and Rotom, and you're probably gonna be fine at the end game.
Yeah.
But the Sand Melodic thing is really my biggest concern with this team, because if you're running Flame Orb Melodic and blocks are up, you're taking 24% just for switching in the Melodic, never mind whatever hits actually coming your way.
Yeah. I think Webs on this team is funny, but they don't have spin to keep them up. And you were concerned about Mienshao's legitimacy, so to speak, as a like they don't have a grass or a water in their regen core, which I think is a bit awkward.
I don't really mind Mienshao here, it's just that people insist on putting Mienshao on regen cores for some reason, even though it's like 60-60-60 bulk, so you're really not getting much done with that.
65.
It's fine here. Oh, excuse me.
Yeah,
it's fine
it's
here, it's appreciated physical offense, and the speed is quite nice. It's fine.
You recover an extra 7 HP every time you get regen because of that 5. It's just
big money.
Seems just fine. It's just struggles. I think Mega Tyranitar is absolutely broken at 11 points. So it was a good pickup. I think the team is decently coherent. I think it can be strong with like Future Sight G-King, but I think it is. I don't think it really needs G-King to be Spinef very much. So I wonder if this is going to lead to the team running Trick Room occasionally. It's just it doesn't have much else that functions under Trick Room at all. So it's just a bit a bit interesting. I'm really interested to see what Leo does wind up bringing, because they are certainly not the worst team builder around the block, you know. I think this is probably a team to watch out for that may wind up overperforming where it sits, but I'm currently not seeing it myself. Alright.
Yeah, this is certainly not a bad team, and Leo is far from a bad player or builder. It's just that some of the pieces feel mutually counter-synergistic, or that some things like the Rotom and the Steelix make for a really awkward electric situation. Of all the teams we've seen, I think this is the one that has the highest potential to skyrocket in PRs if they make a few transactions. So I'm definitely interested to see if they're going to do any mid-season moves.
I think the Oshifu team could move the highest with transactions. Because it just isn't functioning right now. It's like, it turns out if you make it to, because like, but that's also the team that I think is the lowest. Okay, well, have you ever just been, you know, it's like, you know, a Saturday morning, you know, you're waking up, it's probably around like, you know, 9 or 10 a.m. And you're feeling a bit hungry, you want like you know, you check your fridge, oh, I have a tiny bit of little smoked salmon left over, oh, I got some cream cheese, you know what, I'm gonna have a bagel. Does that often happen to you, Etesian?
If you say so. Like that. I'm trying to recover from that transition and also the fact that I now want to eat salmon. This is a largely fine team. Man, I really should have eaten before we started this. This is a largely fine team, with the main problem being that it is quite slow. It only has Garchomp above base 100 and some speed boosting options, the Necrozma, Autotomized Stila and the like, fine, but it does need a bit to get going, and even like there are plenty of 105 speed mons, plenty of 110 speed mons. Garchomp may have to be Scarf a lot because it might not always get the time to get off a scale shot.
I think that this team has 7 really good mons, and they make sense together, but I kind of wish that the last 8 points were spent on getting like a degree of speed to this team, whether it be like a combination of like a Cincino and an Avapon or something, or whether it be just getting like an 8-pointer that's decently fast. There was certainly no shortage of decent 8-pointers. Oh wait, no, that's not legal. 7 pointers though, and then like 1 point or something. I don't really understand the Rotom Frost or Wildfed picks. I don't think Rotom Frost is very good. I don't like that it is this team's only defogger, with them being pressured to run Rapid Spin Serena a lot, which is fine. Rapid Spin Serena is competent, but move slot pressure is always an issue that Serena is going to face ever since it got access to Triple Axel, and now it's 4 attacks it wants to run instead of the classic 3. Yeah, and I don't know what I don't think Wobbuffet makes sense on this team at all. Also, I'm a Toxapex hater now, so gotta hate on Toxapex.
I'm told Rotom Frost is a great mon if you manage to actually hit blizzards.
I
know what that.
I can say that was
what that's like.
It was Goobazimus. You know, take that what you will.
Yeah,
I don't know. I
ultimately,
think Crossman's really good. Celesteel's really good. Garchomp's really good. This is a team that Celesteel makes sense on. Toxapex is funny. Gmolt's really good. Serena's really good, and Licky Licky I think is a really good support option on this team. It's just fine, but it could really do with having speed, and I think that it may wind up struggling into a few other teams because they have that speed and this team just doesn't. But you know what? I think after, you know, being in the Ross Sands Dubai, you know, it's a beautiful city. It's really built up. You know, there's absolutely beautiful buildings over there. But sometimes you just want to, you know, you want to kick out on a beach and relax. You know, you want to like go to the tropics, get a nice bit of warmth away from the equator. So you know, I think that we should take a holiday to Hawaii. The Hawaiian Shaman's Spirit Archers. This is the Cure Black team. Unlike the Speed one, if you've watched that, I actually like this Cure Black team. How do you feel about it, Etesian?
It is quite a good Cure Black team. They did manage to cover a lot of the weaknesses of it. Cure Black and Gardevoir is also a very scary combination when it comes to breaking power. The one only concern I have with this team is that I can't really envision its endgame very well. Aside from Prankster Tailwind Tornadoes into Cure Black or Gardevoir, I'm not really sure. There is no bespoke win con. Like, my mind goes to Blunder Policy, Cure, and Black, and that's not where my mind should go as far as game-winning setup goes.
I have a question. What does Cure and Black miss?
Blizzard if you're unlucky, I guess.
Blizzard if you're lucky, just get the freeze. I genuinely, I'm not sure what inaccurate moves Cure gets besides Blizzard.
I would have to check, but I really can't think of much
Pulling it up
else.
right now.
Dragon Dance and
Gets
Scale
Focus
Shot are
Blast. Oh yeah, specifically, sorry, we should mention that Scale Shot and Dragon Dance and potentially Ancient Power are banned off Cure.
That is correct. At least 2 out of 3 of those. I'm not sure about Ancient Power, please stop asking me.
Look, I asked Keith as well, and you know what? I'm starting to think that only Riz knows the answer to these questions. Oh yeah, yeah, like what, you're gonna miss 90% accurate Zen Headbutt, 80% accurate Stone Edge, 70% accurate Focus Blast, which regular Curum has certainly run in the past, but probably not as good on Curum Black, because it has less attack.
Is that this team is very good at playing neutral. It will just sometimes have a bit of a rough time locking down that end game. It might struggle against opposing setup or particularly fast things after Salazzle and Tornado are whittled. And it has a bit of an awkward situation in that Palisand being what it is, you're largely reliant on Ferrothorn setting hazards and...
Specifically Ferrothorn setting rocks instead of being able to set spikes.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It's fun at that, but how well it can stick around to the end game is really dependent on how much fire coverage your opponent has.
Yeah.
So this team can play the long game unless you really need hazards for that. In that case, maybe it can.
I also just, the fact that it doesn't have rapid spin support, so you're defogging whether it be with Rotom or with Torn, means that you also, again, pressure not to run spikes, which means the Ferrothorn is less good than it sometimes is.
And that is another thing in that as good as Tornadus is a Desperation defog, your reliable, consistent defogger is Rotom, which is also already pretty busy on this team, so might be worried about it getting overtasked.
God of War is your support for it.
Pressure, but...
not having wish support into Rotom means it's going to feel pressure to run Pain Split. I don't know why they didn't spend their 1 point on picking up like Lickitung or something. Like, a cheap wish spawn would, I think, have been nice for this team.
I think Lickitung is 2 points actually, but in that case I would say downgrade the Palisand. Yes, this team's fighting checks aren't that great, but a Palisand isn't really addressing that anyway.
It's not addressing it if the fighting type has knockoff. Yeah, I mean, look, God of War and Salazzle are both just frail fast ones. Also, this team's Scarf, this team's over base 100 is awkward because you can Scarf Cure, but then you're taking rocks, and again, you don't have defog. Sorry, you don't have rapid spin, so that means you're defogging, which means Ferrothorn is once again pretty awkward. Or you're scarfing Salazzle, you're scarfing Pangoro, you're scarfing Tornadus. None of these are, like, Pangora's a bit slow, and Salazzle and Tornadus don't really have that immediate power to really be able to scarf effectively. So that, I think, is a serious concern for this team, and you might wind up then scarfing Rotom.
I'm going to disagree with that, because Tornadus does not have 125 special attack, so it gets the job done, but...
It also has Hurricane and Air Slash.
I'm told the answer to that is just hitting your moves. I have yet to accomplish that, but people tell me that's how that works.
I think I have probably clicked over 2,000 Hurricanes. I think I have hit less than 1,000 of them.
That would make sense.
And many of those I clicked while in rain.
Oh god.
I missed one into a utility umbrella once.
Well, that's fun.
It's great. It's a very funny mechanic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, this team is it's really synergistic in terms of its offensive synergy and its defensive synergy. I just think that it struggles to have that top end and it struggles to have that late game. Beyond that, this team is honestly phenomenal. It's really strong. Very much like it.
It is quite a strong team. I believe it was the 4th in draft order, and it was our 2nd team in the order for quite a while, and we just happened to find teams that slightly edged it out, and that's that.
Yeah, look, none of these teams are particularly bad beyond, you know, I think we've mentioned which team we thought was bad. And
you're just a Diglett hater.
What, sorry?
You're just a Diglett hater.
Let it be known. No, I said the Diggle is better than Gligar. That means I think it's like a 10-point mod. You can't hold me on that one. Okay. Well, you know what? Many teams have had issues with speed so far, but if there's one team that does not have issues with speed, it's the team with Deoxys speed. I'm really struggling. I'm really struggling here.
They got the speed, it's right there. I see the word speed on it.
Yeah, it says speed. They also have Crobat at 130. They have speed control in Thwackey. And then that means they also have Grassy Line Kartana, which is still slower than Accelerock, but resists Accelerock, so... Sorry.
Wait, it gets classified?
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes a lot more sense now.
Sure. I don't think it's good for you to click. You'd rather click Leaf Blade, because it's just stronger.
Probably.
But, you know, you can run Choice Band a lot more interestingly with, like, a Terrain Extender Thwackey. I've seen that. I've seen that memed with Terrain Extender on Rillaboom on ladder before. I don't think I've seen it in draft, but it wouldn't surprise me if I've seen it and just forgotten. Look, Conk is funny on this team. Megachomp, Heatran, Volcanion are all really tanky, really strong mons. Deoxys speed itself is not very strong, but it is tanky. Katana, tanky on the physical side, incredibly specially frail, but very strong. This team is just like strong and tanky. You slap a Specs on Florges, and I think this team's alright. That said, the ground matchup is awkward, but at least the opposing team is going to be pressured into running Earth Power and High Horsepower. Oh, wait. Garchomp Mega doesn't have High Horsepower. It's only got Stomping Tantrum.
Ooh, that's a problem. That might mean mixed Trump more often than they like. Or,
Yeah.
well, Thwackey is 3 points, so they probably just don't bring it much.
Yeah. The thing about Thwackey versus Rillaboom is your opponent kind of has to respect the Thwackey, but you have to respect your own Rillaboom. I really like Volcanion on this team. It's really strong. Obviously, the ground matchup is awkward, what have you, but in terms of breaking a lot of the mons that are annoying for this team, Volcanion absolutely does. Specifically, opposing grasses come very strongly to mind.
Yeah, Volcanion makes a lot of sense from that perspective, but it is also one of my main complaints with the team in that this team's its ability to play the long game is a bit questionable, and a good replenishable water really would have been nice here, rather than a water that has to run boots, can't run leftovers, doesn't have manual recovery, and is weak to Edge Quake or Horse Quake. I feel like maybe they could have consolidated Thwackey and
Did you
Gustle.
just... Sorry, I think you want to rethink that. You said that instead of being weak to Edgequake, it's weak to Horsequake.
I have horsepower.
Yeah, and Earthquake.
Moving on.
It's weak to
Feel
Edge
like you
Power. It's weak to Power
Feel like-
Power, Power Gem and Earth Power.
Oh boy. I feel like you could have compressed the Thwackey and the Guzzlord into some budget water, like I think Jellicent might be a
I, don't
7.
know, I like the Thwackey a lot. I like moving the Guzzlord around might have been interesting. Moving Conk around, moving Crobat around. I think maybe Crobat is the one I would probably flex on this team.
Thwackey makes sense for 3, but... for 3 points, but... Oh, so does Crobat, but I guess they could have gone down to a slightly cheaper flying type to fix that. Not that they might not even need to fix that, because the team is quite solid at the end of the day.
Look, if they position well, and they absolutely can, this team is really difficult to deal with. Especially with the Spikes up.
Definitely, especially with the Deoxys there, I don't think there is a way to prep for everything this team has to offer.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is a team where you kind of have to make calls about what you hope Jamal is bringing, and sometimes you really just call that wrong. Well, in fact, one could say that, it'd be a graveyard smash, do the mash. It would be a, it'd be like, we'd have a bit of a party, we'd have a bit of a bash. This team
I
is
love
just
playing
strong.
that mode.
Sorry, what was that?
Never mind, move on. What do we have here?
We have the Seattle Soul Z. It's strong. They just have strong mons and then like tech pieces, and I think the tech pieces make more sense on this team because they aren't actually filling important roles. They're just giving alternative options. Whereas the important roles of this team are filled by some incredibly powerful mods that have decent set versatility, even if they aren't like, they're not Mew. But Melmetal still has, bulky assault vest variant. It's got the iron defense body press win condition. It's got sub-toxic. It's got choice band. It's got, protective pads. There's a lot of options that this team has, where the mods have similar sets, but the variance in their sets allows them to change what mods will counter them on the opposing team, and this team does that really well.
Yeah, and the quote-unquote default sets on a lot of these mods also do cover quite a lot, which does allow you the freedom to build however you want with the rest of them.
Absolutely. I think, realistically, like, alternating between, like, the choice variants, just like the choice variants of these mods and their main variants is terrifying for a lot of opposing teams. This is a team that just like, wow, this team is decently solid. It's got Mega Galley, which is broken. It's got some speed control. You weren't super big on Aerodactyl. Scoliped's funny. Raichu is probably not great, but something. And Sylveon has quick attack if you're really that concerned. And Donphan Ice Shot, late sneak. I think his team's pretty solid.
Yeah, they probably could have compressed the bottom 3 mons into something more usable, but at the same time, Porygon is actually pretty alright.
Yeah,
I can understand them. Yeah, I can understand them wanting to have Ghost Resist that isn't 4 times weak to Dazzling Gleam or some such when they're fighting something where that's relevant.
It's also Trick Room Teleport for Melmetal.
Also that.
Yeah, Servine is just a 1-point defogger, which is alright. Raichu is pretty fast. I think it's got knockoff. I'm pretty sure it's knockoff. It can pivot. And it's electric immunity. I think it's alright. I think this team's pretty alright. Just a good team. Overall, good team. I would say this is a good team out of 10, So now, for any of the Jaden Animations fans in the chat, we have another Jaden Animations fan. So we have the best game ever made, coached by Hopeless, with the Fossil Fighters from the recent Jaden Animations video. It's just choice team. I actually kind of feel like this could have been flipped with Bashes, but the teams are pretty close, I think. It's, Lando T, solid. Mega Mawile, unhealthy sort of on. Primaria, really strong. Nihilego, strong. Win condition sort of on, but also like easy solid support mon, easy solid breaker. Starmie, funny. Zergatry, similar to Nihilego, where it can win, but it also breaks pretty well. Breloom, really difficult to deal with. Sometimes it's really sticky sort of mon. Both its defensive and offensive sets have very distinct counterplay that's really annoying. Sableye, Prankster is always a convenient thing to have. I probably would appreciate a Dark that resisted Ghost itself on this team, because Bouffalon here is maybe not the best thing, and then Salamence is itself a win condition that is also a good support mon.
This is quite a good team where our main talking point was the Starmie and how Azelf is in the same cost here and undrafted. The thinking was that Starmie here is alright, it makes sense. It's another spinner for your team, it's ice resistance when you have 2 mons that are 4 times weak to ice. But at the same time, if you look at the scarf options on this team, in particular things you can scarf that are above 100 speed, Starmie's okay, and then you have Nihilego, which has some player and coverage problems, particularly it cannot hit steel types well at all. Where something like an Azelf would have really covered that weakness quite well. So the Starmie makes sense, it might just be a difference in opinion, but at the same time, maybe you could have scrapped the Sableye and Bouffalon and maybe even Salamence, and done something else there.
I think that there's even just the thought process of the Scarfers in general. Not having, having Lando as your only Scarfer with U-turn is a bit awkward. Azelf itself just having U-turn gives you a decent bit of flexibility, but I think this team just lacks a fast Pokemon that immediately threatens things out. It's got decently fast Pokemon with Nihilego and Salamence, but Nihilego doesn't force everything out by any means, and having a mon here like Azelf that is just immediately pressuring your opponent to respond to it, rather than Starmie, which opponents can tend to play. Opponents almost want to stay in more against Starmie because of analytic. It's just, I think, a bit of awkwardness that this team didn't necessarily need. But look, this team hits incredibly hard, and it has a lot of decent support to it as well. A lot of mons that can switch into winning pretty easily, and a lot of sets that you'll have to see what they do before you can really know how to play consistently around them. Good team.
Yeah, this team definitely has a good amount of options in its toolkit. It just will depend on how well it is piloted. It is quite strong, it will just come down to some nuances.
So, speaking of teams which are quite strong, and maybe strong without necessarily having immediately strong Pokemon, we have the Pixelated Outrage with Koko, Gliscor, Jirachi, Zarude, Azumarill, Blacephalon, Weezing, Megalotarian, and technically Kecleon, which I know that Carmine has brought them to games before, and has done stuff with it, but I think realistically this is a team with 8 really solid pokes. It's just a team that has the fact that both of its like major checks and stuff, like Blacephalon and Azumarill, feel like maybe pressure to check fire types a bit much for this team was the only real criticism we have of this. The team has amazing momentum, it's got solid offense, it's got decent defensive backbone, Jirachi's a great wish support, and like opposing teams basically all want to run ice moves and that also are on mons that break through Jirachi to deal with it.
Yeah, for what it's worth, this team has alright manual recovery, and also while Jirachi does have to take a bit of a bulkier role sometimes, this team can afford to not run Scout Jirachi, and it does like Wish Jirachi anyway, so a bulky role suits us pretty nicely here. By the way, I hadn't zoomed into this logo before, I love the terrible pixelated look.
No, sorry, the reason it's pixelated is that this is actually a GIF, but I don't have the GIF version.
Oh,
it normally sparkles all around, which is why it looks very pixelated. But yeah, it normally does look better than this. But you know,
honestly, I'm a fan of this aesthetic. I think it works.
You know, I'll tell Carmine you said that, by which I mean hopefully Carmine will watch the video. Yeah, so this team's great. It's really solid. Like this top 5 that we're reaching into now, these teams are really strong. I guess not, it's more the top 6. I think Bash's team's very much inclusive in this. These teams are all just great, and like picking between them was kind of like, you know, functional like a, oh, you know, well, I had a sandwich today for lunch, so I guess I'll go with this one, or, you know, I had like a bit of a, you know, like a weird smell wafted by, so I'll put this one a bit lower. You know, it's really, these teams are all very good. Except for the top one, which is, I think, a step above. But beyond that, these teams are super close, super strong, and I expect all of these coaches to have really strong seasons.
We definitely had at least 2 instances where we said, don't care which of these is better, they're about the same, just flip a coin, and you did literally reach for a coin at one point.
Yep. Official, the Pokemon Company International, TCG, coin flip coin, Gyarados on one side, Pokemon Company International logo on the other. And I did flip it. And that was, I think, the deciding between Bash and Hopeless's team.
If Bash is upset with their slot and believes they should go 1.1 slot higher, please contact Game Freak rather than us.
Specifically the Pokemon Company International. Game Freak is busy making Scarlet and Violet. Complain about Worlds, I'm sure. You just go to Worlds and then go to the staff there and complain to them. Alright, so this really is a race to the top, and who is our favourite bronze medalist at races? That's right, is the Singlehorn Express, coached by the one and only Sheath Keldon, who did the fantastic speed PRs, which will hopefully be up on their channel, if not today then tomorrow, and honestly, this team is nuts. Cinderace is not allowed to have U-turn, but it is Libero, and I think it's still very good.
This is quite a strong team. There are some things you could try to nitpick at, but even then it doesn't really work. You could say the team has slightly limited removal, but then you look at Corviknight and that's gonna be fine every week. You could say the hazard setting is not great, but there's a Seismitoad right there, so it's perfectly sufficient.
Yeah, and Megadeon, and Bishop.
Yeah, what I said.
Yeah. No, it's just the team is So I think the one concern that I think is valid is that all of these mons don't necessarily lend themselves to win conditions. Almost like the best win condition on the team is rain down Seismitoad, you know, and then beyond that, a lot of these mons are more specialized as breakers or as pivots or as like tanks. But a lot of these mons do have the opportunity to flex into setup, whether it be Calm Mind to make a DRC / Dinosaur body press, whether it be bulk up Cinderace or the power trip Corviknight. All these mons do have that option and that versatility. I just
Yeah, this team definitely excels in neutral, and it has fine ways to secure the end game. Ultimately, also some decent Scarf options between Staraptor and Decidueye, some might hold setup with Bulk Up Cinderace and Calm Mind DNC. This is definitely a good team.
Cosmic Power, Psycho Shift, Sigilyph.
No. Please no, this is Gen 5.
How many teams have we seen that have terrible dark types or no dark type? Cosmic Power, Psycho Shift, Sigilyph. This is Ranbats now. Alright, yeah, this team is just nuts. Like, there's not even that much to say. So, I suppose that, on top of one podium finish, we should follow up to another podium finish, what we would consider to be the catcher win. The Lake Trio Limited. This team is just nuts. This team is just nuts!
This team was the number one on our list for a good long time.
This team is phenomenal.
This is kind of hailing back to when we looked at JCAF's team and thought, wow, some people drafted 4 or 5 offensive ones that are good for every week, and then just a bunch of bulk in support. And this is largely the standout example for that. Hold Medi Gren with Sand is going to be terrifying no matter what your team is, and we've got some lovely support pieces for that.
Yeah. I mean, having the Sand flexibility, but not feeling pressure on Sand is always nice. Obviously, with Hippo, with Tyranitar, they're both really strong mons, so you can feel pressure on them more often than you do with Gigalith. But with Gigalith, your opponent's having to respect the team. The opponent's having to respect that Gigalith can come just as like a sturdy variant instead, if you are feeling like you're too worried about chipping your own mons with Sand. And it's annoying then. There's just a lot of versatility that this team has, and I think that it is going to be a pain to deal with. Absolutely a pain to deal with. GUE is broken too.
Yeah, there could be a slight angle of concern when it comes to longevity in that, yes, the sand chip could be annoying sometimes, especially because 2 of your biggest and your 2 fastest ones are rock neutral U-turn spammers. You can run boots to offset that, but at the same time, not only are the knockoff
4x rock resist Excadrill and 2x rock resist Mega Medicham, which is nuts.
Yeah, it's more about the rock chip adding up on them as they come into U-turn, especially if sand is up, and the knock resists on this team are essentially just Weezing, which is fine, but there is enough raw bulk here and sufficient recovery. Weezing can pain split up, to where I'm not really concerned about this team.
I mean, you're not really threatening Greninja out with knockoff.
Yeah, definitely. It's more about things that could come in to take a knockoff, and Weezing is definitely alright for that, but it's just a mild debuff, which is part of the reason why this is the second team and not the top team.
But, well, to be fair, we still are technically giving it rank 1, if we consider what we're doing. But we did think it was a bit weird having both Kamala and Eldegoss functionally performing the same role of just rapid spin support, but they're both okay. Also, already having Excadrill as well. So it's not like this was something which was at premium. I think picking up a lower tier Spiker might have been more enticing to me. But you know what? We did give Catcher the number 1 position because we have to proceed on from them to come to number 0. Also number 52. I remember when I first, I hadn't seen the logo yet, and I just saw the team name, like, oh my god, why is there a Rock Lobster Chuck? And this team is just nuts. I love this team. So our commentary on this team is just, this team is broken.
I tried to take some notes before we started all this. When it got to this team, I just went blank. I wrote, this is good, and moved on to the next team, because
Absolutely.
even if you want to criticize anything, there just isn't much. You could argue that some of these monsters like Latios and Bulu would really like a bit more help moving steals, and Colossal and Primate aren't the best fire or fighting type. Maybe you could have compressed that into something else, like a Simeon would be nice here.
Yeah.
But otherwise, this team is just so strong, it's unreal.
Yeah, this team is nuts. I think, what was it? Magmortar was also 4 points, same as Colossal, which is absurd. Colossal and Galab could have taken 2 points from that to make Primate Simeon, and that would have been terrifying. Could have taken 8 points and made it him only, I think. So if they're feeling like they do wind up struggling with steals a bit, they can do that, but they still have Nidoqueen, which is one of the best steal moves in the game, and basically all of their mons have fighting moves. This team's just nuts.
I wouldn't even say that they struggle with steals so much as just the presence of steals gets in the way of, like, you can't run specs on Latios as easy.
Yeah, for sure.
Like minutia.
Well, until you realize that, like, their steal is like, I don't know, say Klefki or Skarmory, and Latios just beats them anyway, you know.
Hey, at least nobody drafted Skarmory in this div.
Oh, was that true? I thought we saw
I don't remember looking at Skarmory.
But you know what? It's very possible that I am just insane. I am well known for not being mentally stable.
I can confirm there is no Skarmory. We win.
Well, ultimately, I think I just think this team is really strong. I love Latios, and I love having a team that works well with Latios. Weavile absolutely does that, you know. Yeah, but yeah. Ultimately, I think, you know, we were at the beach, everybody had matching towels, somebody went under a dock, and there they saw a rock, but it wasn't a rock, it was a rock lobster. Thank you guys for watching, and thanks a ton to Etesian for giving us their support, and may they co-commit many an act in their future.